All right, so for this game, looks like we have what is essentially just a straight sequencing game. So we'll set it up accordingly. We have 5 positions to work with. And then we also have different types of things. So essentially we have I and N, and these 2 reports are both going to be of general interest. And then we have 3 elements, S, T, and W, and these 3 reports are going to be of local interest. So we can just subscript the types. Now from there, I suppose we can just go straight into the rules. Now the first rule starts kind of, it throws us a bit of a curveball. So there's apparently going to be 2 segments within this show, and the first 3 are going to be segment 1, and the next 2 are going to be segment 2. But to keep track of that, we can just kind of put it on top of the board. So we can say that essentially all of this is going to be segment 1, and then all of this is going to be segment 2. And beyond that, that's pretty much all we need to do. We can just go into the rest of the rules. The second rule tells us that within each segment, we have to have the longest ones before the shortest ones. So we can say that within a given segment, long has to come before short, and I'll use these square brackets to kind of denote the segments. Yeah, let's keep going. Each segment has to have at least 1 local interest, so we can say a minimum of 1 L per segment. Now, in terms of that, so we have 3 locals, and I suppose we only have 2 globals, really. So the only way that you could have violated this rule is if we stuffed both of the globals into 4 and 5. So I suppose this is just kind of an indirect way of saying that these 2 can't be in 4 and 5. One of them will have to go into segment 1 at the very least, so that you would have at least 1 local interest in the second segment. Next, we are told that national has to be the longest of the 5. Now, so here we are told that the longer guys are going to have to go before the shorter guys, but that's only within a given segment. So that means that N has to go ahead of everyone else within that segment. Now, in terms of how to symbolize this, I guess we could say something like within a given segment, N is going to have to go before everything. And again, I'll use these square brackets to indicate within that segment. But really, that just means that N has to either go into 1 or alternatively into 4. There's only 2 possibilities for the N, which is kind of nice. Next, we are told that S has to be the shortest of the 5. So same kind of thing. We can say that S has to go after everything, but again, only within that segment. And for the record, S is a local and was a general. So yeah, that just really effectively means that the S will have to go into either 3 or 5. There's only 2 major plays for that. Next, we are told that international is always longer than weather. So I has to be, now that's a kind of a curious rule, isn't it? Because just because it's longer doesn't mean it's going to go ahead, because that doesn't actually say that they are in the same segment. So I guess we can kind of say that international will have to be ahead of the weather report, but only if they are within the same segment. So if they're within the same segment, then yes, I is going to have to go ahead of W, but otherwise they have flexibility. So from there, I suppose, I mean, this is kind of good, right? We know that N and S are really heavily restrictive, and really that's pretty much most of what we have to work with. So you know what, let's go straight into the questions. I don't think this is worth exhausting. Question number 1, we have our standard exclusion question. So as usual, we do this by the original set of rules. So first rule was that we have, well, I guess 2 segments, and then we have 3 and 2, but it doesn't seem like anything violates that. No, I think we're good on that. Next, we are told that we have to have longest to shortest, but we can't really test that directly. Next, we are told that every segment has to have at least 1 local interest. So let's see. Answer choice A, we have S, W, that's fine. B, S, T, we're good. C, we have W and T, that's fine. D, we have W and S, we're good. E, ooh, here we go. So you'll notice that in answer choice E, there's no locals in the second segment. All of the locals are in the first segment, which doesn't work. So we can get rid of answer choice E. Next, we are told that national has to be the longest, which really just meant that it's first in whichever segment that it's in. So Answer choice A, you'll notice, violates that because we have N in the middle there, so that's not going to work. B looks good, C looks good, D looks good. Let's keep going. Same thing for S, but on the other end. S has to be the last one in whichever segment it's in. So B looks okay, C not so much. We can't have sports be the first of the second segment, so that's out. And D looks okay. And lastly, as far as I and W, we said that if they're in the same segment, they'll have to be I before W. So answer choices B and D. B has them separately, which means that this rule doesn't do anything. Answer choice D. So you'll notice that in D, I and W are both in the same segment, but I is after W, which doesn't work. So the best answer to question number 1 becomes answer choice B. And as usual, we'll just plug that into the board. So B says NIS followed by WT. And I guess we can indicate that N and I are both globals, or generals rather, and these guys are locals. Next, first local question we have is number 2. Let's take a look. If the traffic report is the last report of the first segment. Ooh, okay, so if traffic is the last of the first segment, so that means that it goes in position 3, what does that tell us? Well, first of all, we know that S has to be the last of whichever segment it is in. So it can't go into segment 1. It's going to have to be last in segment number 2. So that's a decent enough start. Now, N still has to be first wherever it goes, but I feel like that's still flexible. And then I and W, I mean, if they're both in segment 1, they'll have to go in that sequence, but they could also be split. So I'm not sure there's more we can do. And we've taken care of having at least one local on every segment. So let's see. The question itself asks, what must be true? Answer choice A, the national report is the first report in the first segment. So do we have to have, well, we don't really know where the national report goes, so it doesn't have to be the first report in the first segment. In fact, looking at the rest of these answer choices, they all try to pin down a specific element to a specific position, but the only one we really know is S, right? Because T was part of the question. So we can probably just look for S. And yeah, there it is. Answer choice E gives us sports is the last report of the second segment. That does have to be true. Best answer is answer choice E for number 2. Next, question number 3. If the national report is the first report of the second segment, so if N is the first report of segment 2, so it goes over here. Now, what does that tell us? What can we do with that information? I suppose, well, I guess one thing that we know for sure is that I is not going to go here because we have to have at least one local subject over here. So that is something. So I is going to have to go somewhere over there, but even that's kind of open, isn't it? I'm not sure we know much more because we know S has to go after whatever, but it could still go into either one of its usual 2 positions, and there's barely any other restrictions. The only thing we know is that this guy is going to have to be a local in this position. Let's see. The question itself, what does it ask? Exactly how many of the reports are there, any one of which could be the first report in the first segment? So I guess the question becomes, what could have gone over here? Well, I suppose one thing that we know, S certainly could not have gone there, right? So let's just go down the line. N obviously could not go there because it's already taken. What do we have? We have I, T, and W. Now, I should be easy. If we place an I over here, then we just have to have it before W, which it will be, which seems fine. S will go into its position, so we're good. So I rather seems like it could easily go into that first slot. And then between T and W, T also seems pretty safe. Like, couldn't we do T, I, W in that sequence? And that would resolve this, and then the S would just go into this position. So that seems easily okay. So I think we could have a T there as well. And then the W, could we have a W over here? Well, maybe, because if we have actually, no, that wouldn't work. Because hypothetically, W could go first as long as I is not in the same segment. But right now, I can't go on the other side. We wouldn't be able to do that. So if W was here, then it would have to go before I within segment 1, and that wouldn't work. So essentially, it's just I and T. These are the 2 that could have gone into that first position. The best answer to question 3 is B. Next, question number, looks like 6 is our next local question. Let's see what we can do with this. We've got if t is the first report of the first segment. So if we have t over here, and we know that that is going to be a local. So first of all, we definitely know that n is going to end up on the other side. So we're going to have n over here, which means that with n, we're going to have a local as well. So I suppose like before, this can't be an I. So I is going to have to go somewhere in between over here. Although, well, okay, wait a minute. If I is going to be somewhere over here, who is he going to be with? He's going to be either with S or W. Those are the only other guys. Except, yeah, either way you go, you'll notice that I will have to be in this position. Because if I is with W, then I has to go ahead of W. But if I is with S, it's still going to have to be ahead of S because S has to be last. So what's going to end up happening is we'll have to have an I over here. And it's either going to be before the S or the W in this position. So yeah, that's pretty good. Let's take a look. The question asks, what could be true? I is the first? No, it can't be the first report anywhere. Answer choice B. N is the second? No, that can never happen. Answer choice C. Weather is the second report, and no, either way. Actually, well, no. Weather is the second report in the first segment. No, not in the first segment. It could be the second report in the second, but not in the first segment. Answer choice D. The weather is the first report of the second, and no, it would be at best the second report there. Answer choice E. The weather is the last report of the second, and yes, we could have a W here, and this could have been an S. So the best answer to question number 6 is E. Next, let's go back to the global question. So we have number 4. Which of the following cannot be true? Let's take a look. Answer choice A. I is the first report of the first segment. So could we have an I in the first position? And I think so. Like in this scenario, for example, couldn't we have had an I followed by W, and then this would have been an N? That seems easy enough. I don't see any issue with that. Answer choice B. N is the first report in the first segment, and we've seen that explicitly, so that easily could have happened. Answer choice C. N is the first report in the second. Again, we've seen that several times, so that easily could have happened. D. The weather is the first report of the first segment. Now that... So there we did kind of run into an issue previously, right? Because if we put a W over here, then it wouldn't be able to go there with an I. So I is going to have to go onto the other side. Ooh, but no, that's going to be a problem, isn't it? Because here, follow through with me on this. If we put a W here, I ends up having to go over here somewhere. But if we put a W over here, then N would also have to go into position 4. But then you would end up with I and N in 4 and 5. You would have 2 general interest programs in the second segment, and we can't do that. We have to have at least one local somewhere over there. So yeah, the W couldn't be the first report of the first segment. Best answer to question number 4 is D. For the record, just in case, W is the last report of the second segment, and yeah, this easily could have happened right here, where W could have gone into either one. So once again, best answer to number 4 is D. Lastly, question 5. The order of the reports would be locked if what was true. So basically, what would completely resolve the game? Let's see what we can do. Answer choice A. I is the last report of the first segment. Now, we haven't quite seen that yet. But if we put an I over here, what would that mean? I suppose that would mean that S is going to have to go to number 5, right? Because it has to only go into 3 or 5. So if we have an I here, you'll have to have S over there. Wait, but also W, because if I is over here, there's no way to put W in the same segment ahead of it, because if they're in the same segment, then we have to go the other way. So, and then N, actually, yeah, I think this would work. Check this out. So if we put an I over here, this is a global or general interest. So from here, we know that S has to go to the other side, so we can put S over here at the end. We know that W can't go with I, so W would be forced over here as well. But N has to be first in whichever segment it's in, which means that N is going to have to be in number 1, and that just leaves you with the leftover T, who's going to have to go into number 2. That would resolve the game. The best answer to question number 5 is A. Just in case, though, let's take a look at the rest. Answer choice B. National is the first report of the first segment. Now, we've seen that happen actually conveniently here and here, but you'll notice that these two scenarios that we just had, they're different from each other, right? So having n go first does not lock the game because it allows you for at least two different variations, right? In this scenario as well, we could have put an n over here, and then IW could have flipped between 2 and 4. So even that would have been even more flexible. So that wouldn't be enough. Answer choice B is out. C, N is the first report of the second segment. Now that we've seen right here, except S and W were still flexible, which means that wouldn't have been enough to lock the game. Answer choice D, S is the last report of the second segment. Now you'll notice that we had that over here, but we still had a lot of flexibility in terms of the other spots. So that wouldn't have been enough to lock the game. Answer choice E, W is the last report of the first segment. Now, the only scenario that we kind of saw is this one, but that would have locked S over there. But in general, would that completely resolve the game? And I'm not sure that it would, because for example, we could have put a W over here, and S could have gone over here, but T and I would have flipped between these two positions, right? Because they could have gone either way. So that wouldn't have been enough to lock the game either. So once again, the best answer to question number 5 is A.